Good morning to you. It's another Sunday morning. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely morning again, and very warm again. They promised us rain yesterday, but we didn't get it. Chard seems to be like that. It's where I live. It's one of those strange places where the weather forecast says one thing and Chard does something completely different. We often don't get rain when they say there will be rain, and get rain when they say there won't be rain. So everything has to be watered at the moment. It's like summer. Well, what should we think about today? I hope you enjoyed, I think some of you did, the wonderful images from the Hubble telescope. And it made me think that today we could simply have as our thought today, how can we express the wonder that we have for God? We've got examples of how people did that in the Psalms, when they wrote the Psalms and they wrote about what had happened in their lives and how God had done things for them and how they wanted to worship him and praise him. I know a lot of the Psalms were talking about difficult times in their lives and how they struggled to keep their faith when things were difficult, David particularly, but I was thinking more about Psalm 136. In those long hours that you have when everything has been done and there isn't a great deal to be done and the time hangs heavy, have a read of Psalm 136. It starts off giving thanks to God. It then talks about the skies and the stars and the wonders of the universe, and then it goes on to the things that God has done for the people of Israel, and finishes with praise at the end. But every verse has a line. Half the verse is the thing they're remembering or the thing they're talking about, and the other half of the verse is for his steadfast love endures forever. And sometimes if you read it, you skip over that line because it's the same every verse. But it's so important to remember, whatever has happened in our lives or is happening in our lives, it does not change the fact his steadfast love endures forever. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, for those of you who did write a timeline, some of you won't have written a timeline, but perhaps if you didn't, you could just think back over your life and write a psalm. I was talking to Terry about it this morning. He said, say that they can don't write more than 10 verses. Well, you may find once you get started that you can't stop at 10 verses. But there's no obligation to make a long psalm, just like Psalm 36 is 26 verses. But for everything that you write down, every phrase, read Psalm 36 and try and write your psalm a bit like it. So perhaps say, the telescope sees the stars, which he created, for his steadfast love endures forever. The pictures that were sent back stunned our senses, for his steadfast love endures forever. We are but a spot on the earth, for his steadfast love endures forever. And so on. And then write a little bit about yourself, about the important events in your life, like they wrote about the most important event in their life, which was their deliverance out of Egypt. Perhaps you could write a little bit of the psalm about when you came to faith, or how you came to faith. When I was 14, I went to church, for his steadfast love endures forever. And one day I realized I didn't know God, for his steadfast love endures forever. Whatever it is, that's a bit of my personal testimony. Write it down. But maybe you don't want to put for his steadfast love endures forever. Maybe you could say, for Jesus came and died for me, as the refrain in your psalm. Write a psalm in those moments when you're sitting quietly in the garden and the sun is blazing down and you're thinking about how amazing it is, the things that God has done for us. Write a psalm of thanksgiving. Today is the Lord's Day. It's Sunday. It's a day to worship him. And how better to worship him than to celebrate the deeds that he has done for us. And I think maybe between praising God for his creation and praising him for our salvation and the things he's done in our life, there ought to be a little bit in this psalm that talks about the life of Jesus and what he did for us. And just like, I mean, isn't it amazing when you think how many, there was one of our sanctuary spaces recently when we looked briefly at the life of one of the hymn writers who wrote a very famous hymn that I think I chose it that evening, and he'd written 700 and something hymns. Well, hymns are the church's psalms, really. The psalms were Israel's hymns, and our hymns are the church's psalms. And he wrote 700 and something hymns, all about what Jesus had done for us. I mean, and you think about the people who write about Jesus now in songs. They're celebrating the same events, but God gives new music and new words to express the wonders of what Jesus did. So I think in our psalm, there ought to be 2 or 3 verses that actually celebrate the change that Jesus brought about when he came to earth and lived and died for us. So there's a few thoughts for you to start your day. You don't have to do it today. Perhaps make it a project over this week to write a psalm. Call it Psalm 151. My psalm would be Psalm 151, Marion's psalm, written during the lockdown because of the virus. You know, a lot of the psalms had little things at the top of them, didn't it, that said, oh, written before the battle with so-and-so, or, you know, or to the choir master, a love song, a psalm of the sons of Korah, David's prayer for forgiveness, a psalm written during during the lockdown in 2020, when the virus was rampaging around the earth, and God was faithful to me. So, have fun, enjoy it, be creative, and let everything in your psalm be an expression of your worship of God today on the Lord's Day. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.